Yu-Gi-Oh! Around the world is weird. Japan's OCG has a history and metagame unique to them. North America's TCG is unique to us, and Europe's TCG has a whole mess of release schedules and separate card theory. With me finally finishing the GX era Yu-Gi-Oh!, I could jump right into the 5Ds. However, I would like to wait until the new year before we enter the future of card games on motorcycles. In the meantime, it's a perfect time to take a look at another region of Yu-Gi-Oh!, and that is Asian English. This includes places like China, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Taiwan, and Thailand, and China would get their own print run in 2020. None of these out-of-country topics are easy to make a video on, but I'll try my best. So take my hand and let's go on another overseas vacation to one more duelist kingdom. Off the bat, Asian English cards are Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards printed in English like the TCG. If you saw these side by side a TCG card, you'd think they were the same cards. The main difference is the backside uses the Japanese OCG logo, making this region rather distinct. Now, it's not the same as an OCG card back, as there's English text specifying the TCG. The first time I received an Asian English Stern Mystic was by accident, and I was so confused by it. Was it a misprint? A fake card? It was strikingly odd to say the least. The region itself is distributed in Asia outside of Japan and Korea, and the cards are legal only in their specific region, so I couldn't even play it. So if you're just looking on the front of the card, you may not be able to tell it's an Asian English card. Thankfully, starting with Invasion of Chaos on July 15, 2004, regional cards added an AE to the set code to denote the region of play, much like many European regions eventually adopted. So now you didn't need to look at the back, but now the front gave the region away. This was great too because it solidified the region as its own, plus collecting them became easier to identify as well. Yes, so while both sides may look similar to TCG and OCG, the print run is solely unique to this region. A run like Legend of Blue Eyes was essentially a reprint, released on August 8, 2002, and contained 126 cards, keeping it in line with North America as opposed to Europe and their wacky release, for lack of a better term. And while yes, it was first edition, the prints followed the unlimited changes such as Trial of Nightmare's name change and removing references to death in other cards. I suppose since it was printed in Japan for Asian territories, Konami was tighter when it came to releasing the complete set the way they intended. Also, because it was a reprint of the TCG set and released in Asia, this explains the TCG front with the OCG back. A question you may be asking is if these were released in Asia, then why were they printed in English? You see, the Japanese language is mostly isolated in Japan. People in China or Singapore wouldn't be able to read OCG cards, and thus English prints were decided upon as a neutral language, considering it's more commonly spoken around the world. Look, Yu-Gi-Oh! Blew up in North America, and Konami needed to push the product out more ASAP. The release of TCG LOB to Asian English LOB was only 6 months. Releases weren't the same time as North America, but hey, it was certainly better than Europe, as I've discussed already. Speaking of sets, the run of Asian English core sets spanned from Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon to Raging Battle on August 6, 2009. And all the while, the sets weren't far behind the TCG release, again, unlike Europe. There were also additional releases later, like Structure Deck, Lord of the Magician, and ending off with the 2015 World Championship attendance cards. In addition, this is not to say this was only TCG reprints, as the region obtained some Japanese side releases as well. As early as July 4th, 2001, the Asian English Weekly Shonen Jump Lottery prize cards. That's a mouthful. Like the name suggests, this was a weekly Jump Magazine lottery prize where you could get Dark Magician, Blue Eyes White Dragon, Dark Magician Girl, or deck boxes. While the prices were only distributed in Japan, Dark Magician and Blue Eyes were printed in English. They even have interesting translations. Blue Eyes says, "Super rare card, the highest attack and defense card, too difficult to get." And Black Magician says, "He has the highest attack and defense power among magicians." Then on October 4th, 2002 were the Valuable Book 5 and the promotional cards, Fiend Sanctuary, Metal Reflect Slime, and Barrel Dragon. I know what you're thinking. This must have greatly changed the 2002 meta. Well, no, seeing as these were still OCG releases and thus not legal in AE territories. Except for Barrel Dragon, which makes sense given its TCG core set Metal Raiders was released 20 days later on October 24th, 2002, making this practically a sneak peek card. Neat. With the Japanese video game Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters International Worldwide Edition on April 23rd, 2003, came some awesome promotional cards when compared to the TCG. Internationally, we got Valkyrion, Sinister Serpent, and Harpy's Feather Duster. AE received the 3 Egyptian God cards, Slifer, Obelisk, and Ra. Awesome. Should you buy the first edition of the game, you get the secret rare variants, while normal editions included ultra rares. These were the original versions, so while technically they were fit for the region, they were not legal in an official fashion. Plus, had you bought the bundle with the game guide, you get an ultra rare Hannibal Necromancer 2, a card that otherwise received a TCG release in 2008. Staying in 2003 for a little bit, the Japanese World Championship qualifier did have a promotional card printed in AE, Kanan the Sword Mistress. It was originally advertised as Phantom Rare, although no such rarity has ever existed, and the printed card would eventually be super rare despite the promo image being an ultra rare. There were also claims of both Victory Dragon and Blackluster Soldier being participation cards too. However, no evidence of these cards has yet to surface. Kanan would also be a top 100 prize card in the Duelist King Tournament, World Ranking, Season 3. Following in 2004, the WCQ participation card would be Sengenjin. The final 2 core sets were from the 5Ds era and were Crimson Crisis and Raging Battle. 5Ds and Synchro Summoning were so popular that Konami gave the AE market another try after fading off during the GX era, ending with Enemy of Justice in January 2007. Unfortunately, they only got as far as releasing the 2 aforementioned sets, and the sets for that matter are extremely rare. When it comes to rarity, the market over there is less than in North America, and as such, finding AE cards is harder than one would think. Think about it, the cards printed in North America and Canada was mass printed to fill the high demand of such a large area. The AE region, on the other hand, was much smaller due to smaller demand in smaller countries, and the cards weren't legal in Japan or Korea. At least with LOB, they had a relatively large print run, so that's nice. On the other hand, due to certain places not receiving many cards, Asian English prints over there could also be incredibly overpriced to the point where duelists would just use Japanese cards and learn to read the meta since they weren't tough to get. I know what you're thinking. Well, with European prints, they too received a smaller run, and yet because of eventual North American legality with worldwide releases, European cards were actually less valuable. This is true, and the same could be said with AE releases. The difference are higher rarity cards. Remember when I said AE cards were printed in Japan and Konami cared about their products? This applies to print quality and quality control for more prominently higher rarities like ultimate rares, which can go a long way. A lot of the detail is hard to show without looking at them in person, much like European cards or holding a TCG card and an OCG card. But a lot of it came down to foil patterning rather than a flat foiling, which gives much more popping detail to an ultimate rare, especially in the GX era. And also, like I mentioned with these smaller print runs, this meant AE ultis are less printed and thus more sought after by collectors. This applies to any of the ultis and not just the notable cards, so that Cyber End Dragon and Spark Blaster could be equally as rare, if not some other cards being just more popular based on how people like the look of it, like Queen's Knight. I wouldn't be surprised if you were shocked on just how nice AE cards are from a common to ultimate rare. So when it comes down to AE rarity, it ultimately boils down to what set you're looking at. LOB could be cheap. IOC, TLM, or RGBT, good luck. On an odd note, OCG Animation Chronicle Blue Eye still has an English front with an OCG back. Due to the back, I don't think that the card counts as Asian English. At the same time, it does include the AE flavor text compared to the TCG text, so it can't be a reference to the West. Could that be the last hurrah to the once printed region? I'll leave that up to you to decide. Asian English Yu-Gi-Oh! Is vastly different from any other region. North America, Japan, Europe, and we already know how wild those regions can be. It started off strong with only a minimal delay between the TCG DM era releases and started falling off by the GX era and barely held on in the 5Ds era. It wasn't just a copy-paste drop either, as it included some OCG releases as well as some unique content. So much so, it got its own code by Invasion of Chaos. But being by Japan meant it was quality over quantity, and as such, is now a fascinating collection to have, when it comes to later releases anyways. But for now, that is another region done, and who's to say I won't cover more? Time will tell, and until then, have a wonderful day.